we're going to have to make a concerted effort to invest in people. There's no compression algorithm for experience. We all have creativity, and now we have certain tools to help hone it and bring it to life.
Welcome to the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast, where we explore the latest in enterprise trends, tech, and strategy with the top leaders shaping the future.
Welcome to Enterprise Unlocked. I'm your host, Radhika Mukherjee, Editor-in-Chief of Enterprise Talk. Our guest today is Chechitelli, the Chief Product Officer at Turnitin. As the CPO, Annie leads product strategy for Turnitin's academic tools, leveraging AI to drive innovation. Annie began her career in EdTech at Wimba. Before joining Turnitin, she led Kindle content for school, work, and government at Amazon. She's also launched the AWS EdTech Growth Advisory Team. Welcome to the podcast, Annie.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And it is absolutely wonderful to have you on the show.
I'm excited for the conversation.
Yep. I am sure this conversation is going to be super helpful for job seekers, for employees, as well as enterprise leaders.
Yeah.
Yep. And so let's set the stage, right? AI readiness has become a major criteria for hiring with the most employers who are seeking candidates confident and skilled in AI use. However, there's a gap between rising demand from employers and the number of job applicants who are indeed AI ready. So Annie, how is the AI boom different compared to earlier technical shifts with respect to the job market?
I think the first thing is the speed at which we've seen it develop, right? So AI became available for so many people just overnight. And so as a result, it's more difficult for whether it's universities or the employers to really adjust to understand what is needed and how those skills are developed. And so we're kind of at this place right now where we hear that we need to be AI forward, but we're still trying to understand what that means, as well as what are ways that AI helps create ready graduates, but also perhaps how do we avoid ways in which it's making graduates less ready to handle the difficult decisions that they have to make in the workforce.
Yeah. Now, what we've come to understand is that students and educators have almost universally adopted AI in their daily work. But the question is, does this translate into AI readiness and work readiness yet?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the answer is it totally depends. There's still significant ambiguity between what good looks like, both with students and educators, and they're often misaligned when they think about what responsible use is. And in some ways, I think there are definitely students who are using AI to avoid doing work, right? There's always going to be a set of those students, but I think there are a lot of students who are trying to make use of this new technology, but don't yet understand what that looks like, as well as what are ways in which it could inhibit their growth. So, as a result, graduates are consistently developing the judgment, critical thinking, and confidence that they need to apply AI responsibly. And so closing the gap is really all of us coming together. Many times I talk to employers, and even our own, I'm an employer at the end of the day, and it's ambiguous for us in terms of what are the ways that we want employees to be using AI. But at the same time, we know the skills that we want from students, and we're trying to figure out how AI can help bolster those skills so they can be faster or they can be more effective. But at the same time, they understand how to use judgment to employ that in the right places.
Yeah. And adding to that, what are some tangible measures that, academia and academic institutions can adopt to make their students AI ready?
Yeah, number one is just have clear, consistent AI policies so there isn't a gap in expectations. And that usually happens both at, the university level, but also within the classroom, because there's many times that an instructor will say, hey, I want you to use it for this, but not that. But make it very clear what those policies are so the expectations are clear. The second is, talk about it, right? Talk about, hey, ways AI is used. And so the teachers themselves need to learn. So ask the students. We've seen students doing a lot of experimentation, and ask the students to talk about their experimentation around, like, how did you use it? Did you think it provided a good result? I think it's also really important, and we're going to see this, I think, in the next wave of discussions around AI, but talk also about tone and respect for your audience. And how do you make sure that you're conveying a tone in writing, if you're using AI, that is respectful and that you're open with your audience and how you're using AI? I would also say create guardrails, right? So maybe that's brainstorming. My favorite use of AI for students, honestly, is research, because I think that's the most common use that we see in the workforce today. But, like, how are you using it to do your research? How are you testing what it's coming back with you at, and what are the different, how do you go into that research and validate it? I think those are always really responsible, but talking about research validation or fact checking or fact validation is really important as well in the classroom. And also, it also comes down to what we hear about in education in general, is continuously working with students on motivation, right? Around the motivation for school, what school gives you, what university gives you, are tools to be successful and tools to think and tools to understand the world around you, not a grade. I understand grades are necessary in terms of measuring the learning that happened in those university engagements, but really the fundamental purpose is to have students develop the skills so that they have the best chance to achieve their goals and dreams.
Yeah, yeah. And when you talked about the research part of it, it almost feels like it at work also, AI can be used as almost a shortcut.
Mhm.
What's the way to avoid that? How do we prepare students to be more well-rounded?
Yeah, I think that students need to understand what the work that they're doing and the ultimate way it's being used and the impact of it. Many times, students are given an assessment, or they're taking a class, and they don't understand the impact or the tie to the real world. Whereas if you give them examples of things, and they understand how that assignment or that research or whatever output is being utilized, I think it allows them to have better judgment in how and when to use AI. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's conversations in the workforce around, how do employees feel if AI is used in performance evaluations? Right? Like, I think that is a real world situation that the corporate and employers are grappling with, but have students think about it even when they're at school, around, like, what are times and places where you feel that by using AI you might cause consternation within your organization, or what are times where it's really important to represent the most human elements. So and that's why this is so difficult. I think that the employers don't have a good handle on the best way to use AI. There's a lot of articles around, oh, we're able to do this much more development or code development, but then you read another article, it says, no, that's code slop, right? I will say right now, like, we see, I think other employers are seeing a proliferation of information, right? Handing in a 48-page PowerPoint deck without really summarizing or telling me what the recommendation is or explaining the pros and cons. The amount or volume or fluency is not the end goal. The end goal is trying to provide information to make a decision. And right now, I think a lot of employers are seeing just too much information and not enough synthesizing of that information. And I think that's where students need to focus, not so much, I completed this task, but what's the impact of that task? And the employer is going to be looking for you to have a recommendation and also be able to explain why you chose that recommendation.
And so I think we've been talking a lot about the generative AI piece, right? But what's the
Yeah.
scope of AI integration in education, even beyond generative AI?
Yeah, and that's where I think it gets exciting. I think the past 3 years, and when people hear AI, they tend to think of the large language models. And that's why, I think that it's important to start really kind of opening up that language. And so there's a lot of other ways that students are starting to think about using AI. I talked about a little bit. It's still early days, but we're seeing more students learn how to vibe code to kind of create things. Like I think creation and creativity is an inherent human skill. And what are ways that we can bring that to life? There are many students who have the idea for, some sort of application or a tool or some software that they would love to develop to help humanity or to have a business. And they don't always have the skills. They've not learned how to do coding. And that's been the limitation of kind of creation, at least in terms of software, is your ability to develop code. But that's no longer the case. Nowadays, with vibe coding, you can explain in human language what you would like to do and what you would like to see. And so it really opens the door for any student or any employee to provide and create prototypes that then we can talk about and you can put in front of customers or you can put in front of users to say, is this something that would solve your problem? And so I'm excited about more students using vibe code to really understand and bring their thoughts to life. I was actually talking about it in with a chemistry professor, right? The concepts of being able to build 3D models of a molecule. That was something that was more difficult, like, or you had to have a program to do it. But now students can create that themselves and really understand and have I think a more thorough education in the thing that they're studying when they're able to bring it to life. And so I think that's going to open a lot of doors for creativity for students and also for employees.
Yeah, yeah. Creativity seems to be like one of the buzzwords, or at least the motto going forward.
Yeah, and I think that some of the arguments have been made that education um, sometimes is too much about information and memorization and not enough about creativity. And so I think that that's one of the places, if AI is used appropriately, we can really see a lot more ideas. And I also think that has to do with just an LLMs, like developing strong prompting skills. And this is something that we developed in Clarity actively so that we could help students understand what are ways to ask good questions. And that's not an AI skill, it's just a skill, right? Like I'm sure even like as a journalist, right? Figuring out what the right questions to ask and how you ask them and how you follow up to get to the heart of something and to really understand, those are really important skills and skills that we can use in AI. So we think it's important as part of this process for educators and students to share and see those questions, but also help the students learn how to ask questions appropriately so they get better answers. And that also comes back to the creativity. But it's also, creative thinking is something you can practice. I think some students sometimes wake up and they're like, oh, I'm not creative. And that's not true, right? We all have creativity. And now we have certain tools to help hone it and bring it to life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, everybody is creative is absolutely my motto as well. Motto for life.
I agree. And I think that there are students who get discouraged because they don't feel that they are. And I think it's something that they just need to practice and be given the opportunity to share and find those places where they are creative.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, speaking about, upskilling themselves, how can college students personally upskill themselves to prepare for the job market and, the overall world of work?
Yeah, I think it's the two skills I'm seeing that are really setting students apart are self-learning and self-motivation, right? It's, like I said, there's no playbook right now, but it's really important for students to see what's out there and read about what's out there and the pitfalls as well as the advantages. Many students feel that learning is something done in the classroom, and as you graduate, and as you and I know, that's not the case. Like, you have to be doing that all the time. No one's giving you a test, no one's asking you, but it's just part of developing yourself and continuing to stay productive and impactful in the workforce. And I think the sooner students learn that self motivation and self directed learning, that those are a key because they are going to continue to help the student throughout their career. I think that, curiosity as well as accountability are also skills. So taking ownership of those ways that you use AI in how you're representing your work. I think that's really important. I think we all see today there's a little bit of a lack of confidence sometimes in what's being written or what's on the internet or news itself. And I think that students need to be transparent to prepare for that job market. And when they're doing interviews, I think the worst thing to do is improperly represent yourself. I think it's important to be transparent about your uses of AI and your achievements in general, because we want to make sure the job market and the world of work remains a place of integrity. I think, as I mentioned, the strong prompting skills, but I don't like saying prompting skills. It makes it sound like it's just like typing. It's not. It's knowing how to ask questions and how to ask follow-ups, which I said before. Like, I think, you can learn a lot from journalists of how they kind of keep going after to get to what they want. And I think that those are skills that are going to be necessary for the job market and the world of work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's like go to the other side of the bridge, right? What are some of the key AI readiness capabilities that employers are now looking for in new hires?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I don't think employers really know. Some probably do. Like, I think that there are really specific places where a student can say, I use Claude Code in this way, and it makes it so I have an assistant. I'm still providing human judgment. But I think that the employers are looking for the combination of using a tool and human judgment. That combination is really key. I think analytical thinking, as well as experimentation, is really important. You just start a project. I think a lot of students who see this like are really intimidated by a blank page, but that concept of like just get started. It's not going to be perfect, and then you keep going. That I think that experimentation with any type of tool and be willing not to be good at it, which I think a lot of students fear not being good at things. But by the way, none of us are good at this. I always hear students say, like, oh, I'm not great. Just get started. None of us, we could start tomorrow and you're still at the very beginning of where we are with AI. And so that kind of iteration and experimentation is really important, as well as evaluation, like the work, then take a step back and then kind of look at ways and gaps in the work. And this is why we're seeing more I would say more peer review requests coming through when we work with our customers. It's not just teachers giving feedback, but teaching students the skills to be able to look at work and analyze and evaluate it, whether it's theirs or somebody else's, is really important in the workforce. So if they're using AI, taking a step back, and checking it and validating it and pushing on it, and having that openness to be wrong is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go one step further into the world of work, right? So you've now entered the world of work, and so how can enterprises sustainably upskill their employees for AI-driven work or in work in general?
Yeah, I think you need to be really open to what your employees are telling you. I was actually in a meeting yesterday where one of my employees said, "Hey, the team is looking to learn this skill and we're going to need this program. It's not super expensive, but we want to experiment with how we could use it." And so you have to be open to giving them the time. So it's the time and the tools to experiment. Right now, we're at that stage where that type of support is really necessary. If you have your employees working and they're so busy on getting things complete on a daily basis, and they don't have some time to what are called the wandering time, the time to kind of try something out and see how it impacts and see how it gets used. Um, that's necessary in where we are today to give them that space to learn and wander and experiment and then support them with the tools that they need. So I would say listen. A lot of times, like, it's not me who knows what the best tools are. It really is the employees themselves are doing the reading and learning, and they come to you with, "I'd like to try this." And having the culture, that learning culture, which we have at Turnitin, we make, curiosity as one of our values, right? Learn and be curious. And it's really important that we stand beside that. It's not just a value on a slide, but you're giving employees the time and grace to do that work.
So, what are some of the non-technical skills that have become the key to success in the AI era?
Um, it still is critical thinking and evaluation, right? Right now, I would argue in some ways there's too much information. There's no lack of information. There's not a lack of data. Like, every day, if you have news feeds, you could spend your entire day reading different news outlets and you would get nothing done, right? There's just so much. So understanding and connecting what you need to know into also wading through and finding the most useful information that you think is factual and impactful. um, that's going to be a skill, because we live in a world today where, I mean, we always complain about getting too much email. Now I think it's at a whole new level. um, I think where you put your attention, right? Your attention is now becoming one of the most valuable resources. We used to say time is your most valuable resource, and it's kind of like that, but I would say even your attention. So where are you focusing, and knowing where those areas are to focus on and what the most important things are is really one of the most useful skills now. And I think in the next few years, as we're kind of wading through all of this noise, and we'd already had it before large language models and the AI boom with like social media and notifications and everything's always on. But learning how to drown that out to provide yourself the space to think without being influenced all the time from the outside, but influencing from yourself out. That's going to be a key skill.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the attention economy, but kind of focused in on yourself.
Yes, yes. And people don't do it enough. They feel like they always have to respond. There's this kind of like anxiety we all feel, and you have it in the workforce with Slack. I mean, don't get me started on like what are the best ways to use Slack? I do not know. But as useful as that tool, and it is an unbelievable productivity tool, I would never not want to have it. But you also have to know ways of using it to protect yourself and your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking at these ways of optimizing, what kind of mindset and learning framework would help, let's say, an entry level as well as a mid level professional grow in their field in this era we are in?
Yeah, I would say, as I said, like faster iteration on if you want to develop products. So quickly prototyping on new products. So learning about uh, different ways to use AI to bring your ideas to life is really important and going to be a new opportunity. Um, I would say faster decision making. So realizing really early kind of what are the key impacts you have to make a decision, so that you know what information you're seeking out to make that decision, is going to be really important. As well as like I think AI governance. So having an outlook or having a point of view and continuing to evaluate that point of view on ways you're using AI. And like I say this with a little bit of like skepticism because I do not know the answer. And every day I'm seeing more AI in the workforce and I'm seeing how people are using it. And I ask myself, like, is that good? And I don't think we know. So having that open mind to evaluate it and talking about it is really important. I think admitting what you don't know, which has always been a skill, is really important too. We're not experts at this. No one is an expert. And so it's better to say, I don't know the answer. Like, let's have a conversation and a discussion on these topics in a way that um, we can all get to a better answer. So these are all, it's funny, these are so many of these things are soft skills, right? It's how we approach the technology and the mindset around it, as just as important as the technology. But like I read a lot and I recommend that to everyone. I'm not saying you have to read novels. It's not so much that, though I'm a big fan of those. I think you do need to stay current. And you don't have to spend a ton of money or any money to stay current. There's a lot of good sources, and find out who are the sources that you trust in your field or in the discipline you're looking at. But also find sources that you disagree with so that you're taking in both sides of the information. But it's really important to read, or podcasts, that's fine too. Like I'm a big audio listener, but like you have to be taking in the world around you at a much faster rate. And I know that's difficult, and I know that causes a lot of people anxiety because it's just changing so fast. But there's really no way around it. Like you just have to find ways. Like actually I do a lot of walking. I find walking to be incredibly therapeutic. But I'm always listening to something, so I'm able to really focus. But at the same time, I'm also multitasking on my mental health and fitness.
Wow, that's an amazing way, I'm sure, to kind of look at this and deal with this and stay healthy and grow through this process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't underestimate, and I'm empathetic towards a lot of students, right? I have I have one senior who just graduated, and I have another college kid who's a senior, and the amount of anxiety they have about the workforce they're entering and the skills that they have, like I don't discount it. It's real, and we have to find ways for everyone to be successful, both the employers getting what they need in their workforce, but also help the students ready themselves and have really incredible opportunities in front of them.
Yeah, yeah. Something I've been reading is that the space at the top is growing, while the field is kind of being flattened in the middle of the workforce as well as for the entry level, that the scope is kind of drying up. So is it the case that students aspiring to join the workforce have to almost become an expert by the time they join, or is there still scope? And what's your advice in general?
Yeah, this one bothers me because there's a saying Andy Jassy, who's the CEO of Amazon, has, which is called there's no compression algorithm for experience. And that's a very technical way of saying how you build your career is through small pieces of experience along the way, right? And you kind of, just like everything else, you build on top of those and you recognize pattern recognition is really important around, like, oh, I've seen something kind of like this and this is how we handle it and here are the pitfalls. But it's that breadth of experience that makes you an effective senior leader, whether it's decision making, but also we're still organizations of humans, right? How you manage and work with humans, how you motivate them, how you help them grow is still really an important part of leadership and at our companies. And so, we need to do that. You're not going to have senior leaders who are good and effective unless they've been able to develop those skills over time. And so I think that that's the conversation around the, oh, we're not going to need entry level. We just, oh, then how are they going to get to be mid-level career? Like, how does it, they're not, you can't self-study into that. I don't care. Like, I'm a big fan of school, but like, there's no school that's going to get you ready and get you to what it means to be a middle of career person without the experience of actually managing people and managing high level decisions or stress or decision making under stress. Like, all of that has to be learned. And so I worry about that kind of the hypothesis of like, well, we just won't have anybody entering. Well, we're going to have to make a concerted effort to invest in people. And one of the things I've heard some people say that maybe what we need to return to is a world where people would stay at their jobs longer, right? There's that contract or maybe unwritten contract between, hey, I'm going to take a bet on you entry level, but I'm going to invest in you because I want you for this, right? I'm going to build you into that. But that requires more of that staying around mentality, which really hasn't been around for 20, 25 years. And you see a lot more like 2-year jobs, 2 years, and you would change careers. And so maybe that comes back because that's the investment that both sides make to be able to develop a career. I don't know if that's the answer at all, but it's one of those things that's being discussed around in the workforce. Are we going to see more kind of longevity at jobs when they get them?
Yeah, that's definitely a good way forward. At least it's a hopeful way forward.
That's all I can do is have a hope.
Yeah, we have to hold on to that hope for sure. So I want to bring the conversation back to creativity. Let's look at maybe AI and how it's actually opening up that space. So how does AI integration reshape how creativity is viewed as well as nurtured in the workspace?
Well, I think that there are different ways that we have to, now with AI, we have the opportunity to give students more, I would say, employer based situations that are like kind of simulations for them to develop those creativity skills. A lot of when you think about school or university, right, there's a lot of you read, you respond, you have a test, like there's kind of this, did you learn this? But a lot of how you judge learning is through application, as we know, but application is very difficult to do at scale. And that's the problem. And that's hard for people to have that, as well as a lot of that application or involves interaction with a person. But now you can create AI to do simulations that are scalable, right? So think about, we give the example that we're working on at Turnitin is using custom GPTs or teachers having the ability to create new content that gives them that. That's not difficult to create, right? Right now, a lot of times teachers can use AI to create really interesting assignment simulations, but they have to be like really good. Like it's really hard. It's not easy yet. And so we're trying to create like templates. So, hey, teacher, you can create an assignment where a student talks to a person in history or a literary figure, right? You can set that up to give the student kind of that interaction of thinking. We give the example of an assignment in which a student has to decide, am I going to implement a bike lane, right, in a city? And it seems basic, but it's not. It's super complicated. Like, who's against it? Who would be against the bike lane? Who would be for it? Do those interviews, and they can now be through AI. You can have somebody represent different personas. You kind of, as a teacher, you say, act like this persona. Here's what you're interested. Act in this persona. And actually have that conversation with the student so they can then begin to learn how to evaluate different sides, different opinions, and realize things aren't always simple, right? If the world was simple and it was always black and white binary, we wouldn't have jobs and we wouldn't have problems that remain undone. Like there's always complicated nuance that I don't think students always learn. But we can, with AI, create a more simulated curriculum that allows them to experience those things firsthand. And I think that for me, that's exciting. We're not there yet. Like we're all trying to craft, like, how do we make this easy for teachers to leverage AI for really new creative types of things, so that they're giving the power of that to students.
Wow, that looks like a lot of new opportunities kind of opening up. That's amazing. So that segues well into my next question, which is what kind of new opportunities do you see opening up in enterprises for all levels of workers with all this change that's happening?
Yeah, I think that product manager at heart, so I will tell you the way I look at the world. And I always tend to think that's a good way to look at the world, but I could be argued otherwise. I think always understanding what's the problem to be solved and going about that in a fresh new way is the new opportunity, right? I think that it's not so much the execution of it, but like identifying what we need to do. I give the example of sales. I find like I'm not in sales, so it's easy for me to say, oh, that's interesting. But imagine you're managing customers. And when you're managing customers, you can get data from a lot of different systems, right? We all know about whether it's Salesforce or Workday, or there's a system like we have systems of using a product, all these different things. What are the things that if I'm getting up in the morning and I'm like, what should my day look like, that we can bring and make it easier for a person to then have the time to focus and have conversations with their customer without having to do all the extra work, right? And so I think when you come in, the opportunities are to minimize the administrative work so that you have time to have conversations. I would say I mean, it's as basic as you can imagine, but anytime you talk to somebody in the workforce, you say, what were the best parts of your week, right? You're going to say, well, I was in this meeting, we did this collaboration, we solved a problem together. It is that human to human interaction in many ways. So how do you free your time up from the kind of the mundane things you have to do to have more conversations with customers, with employees, or growing employees, or learning new things? I think that is those are the new opportunities, is identifying where are the problems and where's the friction in that specific job that we can try to eliminate.
Wow, that is very hopeful for sure.
Like imagine if your job was just talking to people all day on, different interviews. Like that would be great.
Yeah, without all of the managing.
Which all of the managing and all the setting up and all the administration and all the follow up and yes, all of it.
Yeah. I know this is genuinely the best part, and it sounds like magic. If all of that could be automated, and then just the conversation took center stage. Amazing, for sure.
Yeah, that's what we can hope for.
Exactly. And so this amazing conversation was simply priceless, and it answered so many questions for the future of work in this era that we're in. So much hope. Thank you so much, Annie. Thank you for joining us on Enterprise Unlocked.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Keep listening to Enterprise Unlocked.
Thank you for joining us for the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast. Please do follow us on social media and subscribe for more ideas and insights. Until next time.